The studio buzzed with energy as The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon kicked into high gear. The lights gleamed off the polished set, and the audience's laughter filled the air. Still warm from Jimmy's opening monologue, Mark Wahlberg sat in the guest chair, his lean frame relaxed but alert, his signature Boston edge softened by a practiced Hollywood smile. Jimmy, all grins and quick wit, leaned across his desk, tossing out easy questions about Mark's latest action flick, a gritty crime drama tearing up the box office. The crowd ate it up, cheering for Mark's tales of intense stunts and on-set camaraderie. But Jimmy, known for his knack for disarming guests, had a glint in his eye, like he was ready to pivot. He leaned back, tapping his pencil on the desk, and shifted gears. So Mark, your movies, they're always so intense, so raw. But some folks say you lean too hard into that tough guy image, like it's all you do. What do you say to that? The question landed like a jab, light but pointed, and the audience's laughter faded into a curious murmur. Mark's smile tightened, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. Jimmy, I play what I know, he said, his voice steady but clipped. I grew up in a tough spot, you know that? I'm not out here pretending to be something I'm not. Jimmy nodded, his grin still in place, but he didn't let up. Sure, but you've got this huge platform now. Movies, producing, even your faith-based stuff. Don't you ever feel like you're stuck in that one lane? The street guy, the fighter. Like, could we see you in a rom-com, or something? The audience chuckled, but it was uneasy, sensing the shift. Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped, his Boston accent thickening. You trying to say I can't do something else? I choose roles that mean something to me. I'm not here to play cute for laughs. His tone was sharp now, a warning beneath the surface. The crowd shifted, some clapping for his conviction, others glancing at Jimmy, who kept his cool, his eyes dancing with mischief. No, I'm just saying, you're so good at the tough stuff, but maybe fans want to see another side. Like you've got layers, right? Jimmy's voice was playful, but it carried a challenge, like he was testing how far he could push. Mark's jaw tightened, his fingers tapping the armrest. I got layers, Jimmy, but I don't need to prove to anybody. I do what feels real. You want me to dance around in some fluffy movie to show range? That's not me. The tension was thick now, the studio lights casting stark shadows. Jimmy leaned in, undeterred, his smile unwavering. I hear you, but when you're Mark Wahlberg, people have expectations. Some say you glorify that rough past too much, like it's a badge you wear. How do you balance that with being a role model, especially for kids? The question hit hard, and Mark's eyes flashed, his posture stiffening. I'm not glorifying nothing, he said, his voice low and intense. I tell stories about where I came from, what I've been through. If people can't handle that, that's their problem, not mine. The audience murmured, split between support and unease. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but the stage manager signaled for a commercial break. The cameras cutting just as the air grew heavy. The audience exhaled, whispering among themselves, while Mark sat back, his arms crossed, staring straight ahead. Jimmy cracked a quick joke to lighten the mood, but his eyes flicked to Mark, like he knew the conversation was far from over. As the crew reset for the next segment, the tension lingered, a silent promise that things were about to get hotter. The commercial break did little to cool the charged atmosphere in the Tonight Show studio. The audience buzzed, their whispers a mix of excitement and unease, while the crew hustled to reset the stage. Mark Wahlberg sat rigid in his chair, his arms still crossed, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the cameras. Jimmy Fallon, ever the showman, flashed a quick smile to the crowd, but his glances toward Mark carried a hint of caution, like he was recalculating his approach. The stage manager called for places, and the cameras rolled back on, the spotlight sharpening the tension between the two. Jimmy leaned forward, his voice bright but deliberate. Welcome back, everybody. We're here with Mark Wahlberg, diving into his incredible career and the stories behind it. He turned to Mark, his grin softer now, like he was trying to ease back into safer waters. We were talking about your roles, how they reflect your life. Let's go deeper. You've said your past shapes your work, but some critics argue it overshadows the positive stuff you do, like your charity work, your family values. How do you make sure that side gets seen? Mark's eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on his knee. Jimmy, I don't sit around worrying about what critics think, he said, his Boston accent thick with irritation. I'm out here doing my thing, supporting my family, my community, my movies, their stories, not my whole life. You keep pushing this idea that I'm stuck in the past, but I'm not the one bringing it up. His voice was steady, but the edge was unmistakable. Each word a brick in a wall he was building. The audience shifted, some nodding in support, others waiting for Jimmy's next move. Jimmy raised his hands, his smile still in place but strained. I'm not saying you're stuck, Mark. I'm just asking how you balance it all. You're a huge star, a dad, a guy with a lot of influence. People look at your films and see the street life, the violence. Don't you ever think about how that shapes their view of you? The question was fair, but it landed like a spark on dry tinder. Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, controlled growl. "You're doing it again, Jimmy. You're framing it like I'm out here pushing some bad influence. I tell stories about real life, about struggle. That's what connects with people." The crowd murmured, some clapping for Mark's raw honesty, others unsure, caught in the escalating clash. Jimmy tilted his head, his eyes searching Mark's face. "I hear you, but when you're in that spotlight, every choice gets magnified. Like, you've got kids watching your movies. What do you want them to take away from those stories?" The mention of kids hit a nerve, and Mark's jaw clenched, his hands gripping the armrests. "My kids know who I am," he said, his voice tight. "I don't need to justify my work to anybody. I'm not out here telling people to live like I did. I'm showing them you can come out the other side." Jimmy nodded, his smile fading slightly, like he sensed the line he was towing. "I'm just saying, as someone with that platform, people are watching, judging. They want to know the real Mark Wahlberg, not just the characters." Mark let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You want the real me? I'm right here, man. But I'm not gonna sit here and let you paint me as some guy who's got to apologize for his art." The audience gasped softly, the tension, now a living thing, filling the studio. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Mark's eyes were locked on him, unyielding, like he was daring him to push further. The stage manager's hand hovered near the control booth, ready to cut to commercial, as the air crackled with the promise of what was coming next. The Tonight Show studio felt like a tinderbox, the air heavy with the clash between Mark Wahlberg and Jimmy Fallon. The audience sat on edge, their murmurs fading into a tense hush as Mark's last words hung in the air, a challenge thrown down. His eyes burned with defiance, locked on Jimmy, who held his gaze, his usual playful demeanor tempered by a flicker of unease. The cameras stayed tight on them, capturing every nuance of the standoff. Jimmy, sensing the moment teetering, leaned back, his hands raised in a conciliatory gesture, but his voice still carried a probing edge. "All right, Mark, let's keep it real," Jimmy said, his tone softer but deliberate. "You're saying your art is about showing the struggle, the comeback. But some folks, they see the violence, the grit, and they think it glorifies that life. How do you make sure bis systemio, that message gets through?" The question landed like a spark, and Mark's posture stiffened, his hands clenching. "I don't glorify nothing," he said, his voice low and sharp. "My movies show the truth, the fight to survive. If people only see the rough stuff, they're not watching close enough." The audience stirred, some clapping his conviction, others waiting for Jimmy's response. Jimmy nodded, his eyes steady. "But you're a role model, whether you want to be or not. Don't you ever worry about the impact, especially on younger fans?" Mark's face darkened, his voice rising. "I'm not here to baby anybody. I tell stories that hit hard, that show you can rise above. You keep pushing this idea I'm leading kids astray, but that's not on me." The crowd split, some cheering, others shifting uncomfortably. Jimmy pressed on, undeterred. "I'm just saying, your platform's huge. People judge every move. How do you handle that kind of heat?" Mark leaned forward, his Boston edge cutting through. "I've been dealing with judgment since I was a kid. I don't care what people say about my movies. I care about the guy watching who feels like he's got a shot because of my story." His voice cracked with intensity, and the audience roared, some standing in support. Jimmy's smile tightened, but he didn't back down. "That's powerful, but people want to know who you are now, beyond the roles. So, who's Mark Wahlberg today?" The question hit like a brick, and Mark froze, his jaw tight. The studio fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. "You want to know who I am?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm the guy who's sick of being boxed in for your show." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly, and the audience gasped, the tension snapping like a wire. Jimmy's eyes widened, but before he could speak, Mark turned, his steps heavy as he headed for the stage's edge, the crowd buzzing with shock. Mark Wahlberg's boots thudded against the stage as he stormed toward the curtain, his shoulders squared, his face a mask of barely restrained anger. The Tonight Show studio erupted in a chaotic mix of gasps and murmurs, the audience caught between shock and exhilaration. Jimmy Fallon, still seated, leaned forward, his hands outstretched, his voice breaking through the noise. "Mark, come on, let's talk this out," he called, his tone a blend of urgency and charm. But Mark didn't slow, his silhouette sharp against the studio lights. The cameras swiveled, capturing the moment as the crowd's energy surged. Mark paused at the curtain, his hand gripping the edge, his head turning just enough to shoot a hard look back at Jimmy. "I didn't come here to be your punching bag," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "You want to talk real, I'm all for it. But this ain't it." The audience erupted, some cheering his defiance, others whispering, unsure if they were witnessing a meltdown or a stand for authenticity. Jimmy stood now, his smile gone, his hands raised in a plea. "I'm not trying to box you in, Mark. I'm just asking questions the fans want answers to. But Mark shook his head, pushing through the curtain, vanishing backstage as the crowd's roar followed him. The stage manager signaled for a commercial break, the cameras cutting as the studio buzzed with frenetic energy. Jimmy sank back into his chair, running a hand through his hair, his usual composure rattled. The audience kept talking, some praising Mark's raw honesty, others debating whether Jimmy had pushed too far. Backstage, the crew scrambled, producers barking into headsets, trying to figure out how to handle the fallout. Social media was already ablaze, clips of Mark's exit spreading like wildfire. Fans split between calling him a legend for standing his ground and accusing him of dodging tough questions. Jimmy faced the audience as the cameras rolled back on, his grin returning but strained. "Well folks, that was something," he said, his laugh a little forced. "We're gonna keep the show rolling, but wow, Mark Wahlberg, everybody." The crowd clapped, but it was uneven, their attention still on the curtain where Mark had disappeared. Jimmy transitioned to a lighter segment, a game with the next guest, but his glances toward the backstage area betrayed his distraction, like he was hoping Mark might reappear. Backstage, Mark paced a dimly lit hallway, his team trailing cautiously. His publicist, a sharp woman with a tablet in hand, spoke quickly. "You go back out, you can set the record straight. You walk away now, the story's out of your hands." Mark stopped, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. "I said what I needed to say. I'm not here to play their game." But his agent, leaning against the wall, chimed in. "You don't go back, they'll say you couldn't handle it. You're bigger than that, Mark." The words hung heavy, and Mark's hands clenched, like he was wrestling with the choice. On set, Jimmy powered through, his charm holding the show together, but the audience could feel the unresolved tension. Whispers spread that Mark was still in the building, his team huddled in a green room, debating his next move. The crew relayed updates to Jimmy's earpiece, and his eyes flicked to the curtain again, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. The show was nearing its final segment, and the question wasn't just about what had happened, but whether Mark would return to reclaim the narrative or let the clash define the night. The studio lights burned on, but the real drama was unfolding, behind the scenes, where every second brought the decision closer. The green room backstage at The Tonight Show was a pressure cooker, the air thick with urgency as Mark Wahlberg paced, his boots scuffing the floor. His team stood in a loose circle, their voices low but insistent, trying to navigate the storm he'd unleashed. The muffled sound of the studio audience filtered through the walls, a reminder that the show was marching on without him. His publicist, tablet still in hand, spoke up. "Mark, you go back out there, you take control. You don't, and they'll write this as you running from the fight." Mark stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing, his Boston grit cutting through. "I ain't running from nothing. But I'm not here to dance for their entertainment either." Outside, Jimmy Fallon kept the show alive, his charm dialed up as he bantered with a musical guest, but the audience's energy was split, their whispers lingering on Mark's exit. Social media was a battlefield now, fans posting clips of the clash, some hailing Mark as a real one for standing his ground, others slamming him for dodging Jimmy's questions. The hashtags were trending, the internet dissecting every word, every glance. Jimmy's laugh rang out, but his eyes kept darting to the curtain, like he was bracing for what might come next. In the green room, Mark's agent leaned in, his voice calm but firm. "You've got a chance to flip this. Show them who you are. You walk away, the narrative's theirs." Mark's phone buzzed on the table, messages from his wife, his brothers, all urging him to keep his cool but back him no matter what. He ignored it, his hands on his hips, his breath heavy. "They want me to play the bad guy. Fine, but I'm not gonna sit there and let him twist my life into some headline." His voice was low, raw, like he was talking himself into a decision. A knock at the door broke the tension. Jimmy's producer, a wiry guy with a headset, stepped in, his face cautious but earnest. "Jimmy wants to talk off camera, just you two. He doesn't want this to end like this." Mark's eyes flicked to him, his expression hard. He should have thought about that before he kept digging. The producer held his ground. "He respects you, Mark. He's just doing his job, asking what people want to know. Give him a chance to clear it up." Mark didn't respond, his silence heavy, his fingers tapping against his thigh like he was weighing the cost of every option. On set, Jimmy wrapped the musical performance, his grin wide but his energy strained, like he was carrying the weight of the earlier clash. The audience clapped, but their attention kept drifting, the question of Mark's return hanging over the room. The stage manager signaled that the final segment was approaching, and Jimmy's producer whispered an update in his earpiece, his face unreadable. The crowd sensed the shift, their murmurs growing louder, some craning their necks toward the curtain. Jimmy kept the show moving, but his fingers drummed on the desk, betraying his nerves. Backstage, Mark stood still now, his team watching him like he was a fuse about to light. The producer's words echoed in the room, and Mark's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with a mix of pride and frustration. "All right," he said finally, his voice low but resolute. I'll talk, but it's on my terms." His team exhaled, the tension easing slightly, as he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The studio lights burned brighter as the show neared its close and the audience's anticipation built. The air electric with the possibility that Mark Wahlberg was about to step back into the spotlight, ready to set the record straight or burn it all down. The Tonight Show studio hummed with restless energy as the final segment loomed, the audience's anticipation a palpable force. Jimmy Fallon stood at center stage, his smile holding firm but his eyes flicking to the curtain, where the drama with Mark Wahlberg remained unresolved. The crowd buzzed, their whispers fueled by social media's relentless churn, clips of Mark's exit racking up views, fans and critics alike tearing into the clash. Backstage, the green room door swung open, and Mark stepped out. His stride, deliberate, his team trailing behind, the air crackled with the weight of his decision to return. Jimmy was mid-tense, rapping a light-hearted bit with the audience. When the curtain parted, the crowd erupted as Mark Wahlberg walked back onto the set, his presence commanding, his face a mix of resolve and guarded intensity. Jimmy's eyes lit up, his grin genuine but cautious. "Mark Wahlberg, everybody," he said, his voice carrying relief and excitement. The audience roared, some standing, as Mark stopped short of the guest chair, his hands on his hips. "I'm not sitting," he said, his Boston accent thick, his tone firm but controlled. "I came back to say one thing." The studio fell silent, every eye on him. "I'm not here to play a character for your show," Mark said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension. "My movies, my life, they're about fighting through the hard stuff, coming out stronger. If you hear something else, that's on you. But I'm done letting anybody twist my story into something it ain't." The crowd exploded, cheering his raw conviction, some shouting his name. Jimmy nodded, his hands clasped, his expression open. "I hear you, Mark," he said, his voice softer, sincere. "I wasn't trying to twist anything. I just wanted to get to the real you. Thanks for coming back to say that." Mark's eyes held Jimmy's for a moment, the tension easing, but not gone. He gave a curt nod, then extended a hand. Jimmy shook it, the gesture firm, a truce rather than a full reconciliation. The audience cheered again, the moment electric as the cameras caught every second. Jimmy faced the crowd, his grin returning. "That's what this show's about, folks. Real talk, real people." He paused, glancing at Mark. "Let's give it up for Mark Wahlberg." The applause swelled, and Mark raised a hand to the crowd, his face unreadable. Before turning and heading back toward the curtain, the cameras cut to commercial, and off. Jimmy and Mark exchanged a few quiet words, their heads close, the air between them less charged now but still heavy with unspoken weight. The audience left buzzing, the internet already flooded with the clip of Mark's return, the handshake, becoming the night's defining image. Backstage, Mark grabbed his phone, ignoring the flood of notifications, and headed for the exit, his team in tow. Jimmy stayed on set, waving to the last of the crowd, his smile tinged with reflection. The clash was over, but its impact lingered, in the headlines, in the conversations, and in the stories people would tell about who Mark Wahlberg was, a man who fought to define himself on his own terms.